The Deal, a Novel. Chapter 1. The Box Under the Table. Austin, Texas October 11:47 p.m. The most dangerous thing you can do is notice something you weren't supposed to notice. Found written on the inside cover of the box. I found the game at a flea market on a Sunday when I had nowhere else to be. That's the honest version. The version I told my friend Daniel later, the version that became the beginning of everything, started the same way but felt different in the retelling, because by then I understood that nothing about that Sunday was accidental. It was wedged under a folding table between a broken lamp and a box of Reader's Digest condensed novels. No price tag. No label. Just a battered cardboard box with a pyramid printed on the lid and an eye inside the pyramid that seemed, in the weird flat Texas light, to be slightly more detailed than it had any right to be. The seller, a thin man in a linen shirt with no name tag, no cash box, no obvious reason for being there, told me I could have it for free. It belonged to someone who doesn't need it anymore, he said. I should have put it down. I took it home. ... Daniel Cross came into my life the way most things do that you don't understand yet, sideways, with bad timing, and looking nothing like what he would eventually turn out to be. We were both journalists. He worked tech at a digital outlet called The Revenant, which had a circulation of a worried napkin. I freelanced for whoever would take pieces about what I called the architecture of invisible power, which editors kept publishing under the heading investigative even when my sources were whispering and my evidence was structural rather than documented. We met at a press briefing for a new surveillance bill that nobody was covering seriously except us. We stood in the back of the room and passed notes on a legal pad like teenagers because we both suspected the room was recorded. His note read, "They're going to pass this in the middle of something louder." Mine said, "They always do." What's the loud thing? We went for coffee. We talked for 4 hours. I didn't tell him about the box. Not yet. Chapter 2. The cards themselves. My apartment 3 days later. The box contained 409 playing cards, a rule book the thickness of a short novel, 2 six-sided dice, and a stack of paper money printed in denominations that corresponded to no real currency, millions of dollars in low-denomination unmarked banknotes, the rule book specified, cheerfully. The game was called Illuminati, New World Order. Published 1994. Out of print. And according to a quick search, selling on eBay for upward of $1,800 an unsealed set. I wasn't planning to sell it. I laid the cards out on my kitchen table the way you'd lay out tarot cards, not because I believed in tarot, but because the illustrations demanded space. Each card was a small painting. Intricate, dense with simple, drawn in a style that felt simultaneously retro and precisely contemporary, like someone had predicted what the present would look like and then illustrated it from 30 years in the past. I was 3 cards in when I stopped breathing. Terrorist nuke. Plot card disaster rare 1994. 2 towers. One of them mid-explosion, the blast in the upper floors. The smoke rising in a shape that anyone who lived through September 2001 would recognize in their chest before their brain caught up. Printed in 1994. 7 years early. I turned it over. Then over again. Then I took a photograph and sent it to Daniel with no context, just the image, and the caption, "Tell me what you see." 10:23 p.m. Is that the World Trade Center? 10:24 p.m. Card game from 1994. Where did you get this? Flea market. Free. Weird seller. How many cards? 409. I'm coming over. 10:25 p.m. I haven't eaten. I don't care. I'm coming over. He was there in 20 minutes, which meant he'd started driving before I replied. He stood in my kitchen doorway and looked at the cards spread across the table the way you look at something you know changes the shape of the next several months of your life. Okay, he said. Walk me through all of them. We were up until 4 in the morning. Chapter 3. The Pattern. The Revenant offices 2 weeks later. Daniel pinned the cards to the wall of the conference room he'd borrowed under the pretense of research sprint. He'd photographed all 409, printed them at playing card size, and organized them chronologically according to the real-world events he believed they referenced. The wall looked insane. It also looked like a timeline. Start here, he said, pointing to the top left. This is rewriting history. Game mechanic, allows any player to alter an established fact. Real-world equivalent, 1947. Roswell. The government changes the story 3 times in 72 hours. That's a stretch, I said. Sure. He pointed to the next card. Sniper. Game mechanic, instant removal of a personality card without warning or defense. Dallas, 1963. He moved his finger. Bank merger. 2008. His finger moved again. Epidemic. 2019. He turned to look at me. These are not stretches, Mara. They're sequences. They follow each other in the same order they played out in the real world. The game isn't a prediction. It's a schedule. I had been a journalist for 9 years. I had trained myself to resist exactly this kind of pattern matching, the human brain's catastrophic tendency to find signal in noise, to draw lines between unconnected points and mistake the geometry for meaning. I opened my mouth to say exactly that. And then I found the card that stopped me. The whistleblower. Personality card middle dot rare. A figure in a long coat, face partially obscured, passing a document through the gap in a fence. The document is labeled, too small to read on the printed card, but Daniel had enlarged it. The label read, E911 documents. The same documents that a hacker named Lloyd Blankenship had leaked from a bulletin board operated from inside Steve Jackson Games' own offices, prompting the Secret Service raid in 1990 that tried to shut the game down before it was published. The game had put a card in its own deck referencing the very crime that had nearly prevented the deck from existing. Someone knew what was in those files, I said. When they made this card. Someone knew everything, Daniel said quietly. The question isn't whether this is real. The question is who's still playing. Middle dot middle dot middle dot. That night I dreamed about the thin man at the flea market. In the dream he had no face, just the linen shirt and the careful hands. In the dream he said, it belonged to someone who doesn't need it anymore. And then he added something he hadn't said in real life, they didn't need it because they had the original. I woke up at 3 a.m. and lay still for a long time. The kind of still where you're listening for something you can't name. My phone was on the nightstand. I hadn't touched it. But there was a notification I didn't remember enabling, from an app I didn't remember downloading, a simple black square with a white pyramid. One message, no sender ID. It read, you've laid the cards out. Now someone knows you've laid the cards out. That's how it works. The game observes the players as much as the players observe the game. Put them away for a few days. Or don't. Your choice, my boss. It always is. Middle dot tension rising middle dot. I screenshotted it. I sent it to Daniel. I deleted the app, which was called nothing, just the pyramid square, and which had vanished from my app store history entirely. I did not put the cards away. Chapter 4. The man who illustrated the end of the world. Santa Fe, New Mexico middle dot 17 days later. His name was not in the game's official credits, or rather, his full name wasn't. The cards listed artists by last name only, Grigney, Smith, Hartman. The man we drove 12 hours to find, following a chain of forum posts and collector databases and one archived interview in a games magazine from 1996, was listed in that interview only as D. Fennick, a contributing illustrator who preferred not to be named prominently. He lived in a small adobe house on the east side of Santa Fe, painted turquoise, with a garden that had clearly been spectacular once. He answered the door in paint-stained overalls and looked at us for a long time before he said anything. He was perhaps 70. His eyes were the color of old paper. I wondered when someone would actually come, he said. Most people just post online. He made tea. He did not seem surprised by any of the cards we laid on his kitchen table. He touched them gently, like old friends. When you draw something from a briefing document, you're drawing what someone else imagined. When you draw from a dream, you're drawing what exists somewhere already and is looking for a surface to appear on. Most of my cards for that game, most of the ones people talk about, came from the second category. D. Fennick, October, his kitchen. Who gave you the briefing documents? Daniel asked. His recorder was on the table. Fennick had glanced at it and not objected. Steve's team. The designers. They'd give me a card name and a mechanical description and say, make it feel real. He paused. But sometimes I'd get packages in the mail. No return address. Inside would be a card name and a reference photograph. Not from any news archive I could identify. Current-looking photographs of events that hadn't happened yet. The silence in the room was substantial. You received photographs, I said carefully, of events that subsequently occurred. I received photographs of things that subsequently occurred, yes. He picked up the terrorist nuke card and held it at arm's length. This one came with a photograph. I thought it was from a movie, some disaster film I hadn't seen. The composition was very dramatic. I copied it faithfully. He set it down. Then September came. Did you tell anyone? He smiled in a way that was not particularly warm. I told the police in 2002. They took a statement and I never heard from them again. I told the reporter in 2008. He published a piece that was edited so heavily it said essentially nothing. I told my wife. He looked at the window. She left. Not because she didn't believe me. Because she did. Middle dot middle dot middle dot. He let us photograph his originals. A filing cabinet in the back room, meticulously organized, each illustration in an acid-free sleeve. We photographed 47 cards worth of original art. We photographed the drawer at the bottom, which he opened with a key on a chain around his neck, which contained 11 envelopes. The ones that came in the mail, he said. I kept them. I don't know why. I opened the first envelope. Inside was a photograph, glossy, professional quality. It showed a plaza, Paris, from the architecture, and a crumpled black car, and the unmistakable chaos of paparazzi cameras. And in the right-hand corner, handwritten in a blue pen so faint it was nearly invisible, Diana, 1997. The photograph was undated. But the car was unbroken. The picture was taken before the crash. Princess Di. Personality card middle dot media middle dot 1994. Phoenix original sketched from the envelope photograph. The paparazzi's camera flashes rendered as small stars. The car, black, sleek, tunnel-bound, captured in the moment before impact. Drawn in 1994 from a photograph dated, in its corner, with a year that hadn't arrived yet. Daniel was very quiet on the drive back to the motel. He didn't speak until we were inside, door locked, curtains closed, his laptop opened a new document he was filling with notes. Someone sent those photographs, he said finally. Yes. Someone who had access to images of events that hadn't occurred yet. Yes. Which means either time travel, which I am not prepared to report on, or the events weren't accidents, I said. They were productions. And someone with access to the production schedule sent Fennec the stills. Daniel closed his laptop. He looked at me for a long time. We need to be very careful, he said. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number, Santa Fe's a long way from Austin. Drive safe, mais vos. Chapter 5. The Network. Austin, New York, everywhere. The Network is the name of one of the Illuminati factions in the game. Their special ability is information. They know what every other player has in their hand. They win by extending their control arrows through every communication channel until there is no message in the world that doesn't pass through a node they own. In 1994 that was satire. In the present day it is infrastructure. I became aware we were being followed on a Tuesday. Not the cinematic kind of followed, no platzers, no obvious surveillance. The digital kind. The kind where your phone's battery drains faster than usual because something is running in the background. The kind where your laptop's camera light flickers for a quarter second when you haven't touched it. The kind where you mention an ID out loud and see a targeted advertisement for it 6 minutes later, on a platform where the microphone should have been disabled. I mentioned this to Daniel. He had already noticed. He had, quietly and without telling me, purchased 2 burner phones. He handed me one across a coffee shop table with the practiced casualness of someone who had thought about this for days before doing it. New communication method, he said, not looking up from his coffee. Don't use your real phone for anything related to the cards. You've been planning this. I've been researching. He slid a manila folder across the table. The Secret Service raid in 1990. I found the original affidavit. The warrant listed 3 targets, Blankenship, the E911 documents, and, he tapped the folder, the 3rd item they've redacted in every version of the document I can find. Every foil copy. Every archive. The 3rd item is always black. Remainder of item 3 classified under Executive Order 13526 middle dot National Security Exemption B1 middle dot Contact NFC Legal for Declassification Inquiry middle dot Expected Declassification Date. Broken vertical bar broken vertical bar broken vertical bar broken vertical bar. That's a national security classification, I said. On a raid of a board game company. That's what I thought. He drank his coffee. So I asked myself, what could Steve Jackson have had in his possession that required a national security classification to keep hidden? Not the hacker. Not the 911 documents. Something else. Something that made federal agents drive Boston before dawn and take every computer in the building. The game itself, I said. Specifically, Daniel said, the cards that hadn't been illustrated yet. The briefing documents for the remaining cards. Fenix said he received packages. Someone was sending him production material. If those packages were originating from inside Steve Jackson Games, or being routed through it, then what the Secret Service actually seized was a pipeline. Not a game company. A pipeline for distributing encoded intelligence about future operations, hidden inside the most perfect possible cover, a card game about conspiracies that everyone would assume was satirical. I stared at him. "That's insane," I said. "Yes," he agreed. "It's also the most coherent explanation for everything we've found." "Yes," he agreed again. Middle dot middle dot middle dot. That night someone tried my apartment door at 2:17 a.m. not aggressively, just the handle turning, testing. I was awake. I had been awake for an hour, sitting in the kitchen with the cards spread on the table again, unable to stop arranging them. I heard the handle and went completely still. It turned once, paused, turned back. Footsteps moved away down the hall. I photographed the entire card arrangement with my burner phone and texted the image to Daniel. Then I placed the box of cards inside a locked fireproof safe I'd bought 2 days earlier. I hadn't told Daniel about that either, both of us quietly preparing for the same thing we hadn't yet named out loud. The cards I left out, the ones on the table, visible, were the ones I'd identified as already played. The ones that were history now. The ones I thought couldn't get me killed because they'd already happened. In the morning I discovered I'd been wrong about which cards were dangerous. Chapter 6. The Charismatic Leader. Austin middle dot 1 month in. The card was on the table when I came back from the kitchen with my coffee. I had not placed it there. I was certain of this because the Charismatic Leader card was one of the 47 I'd locked in the safe. The safe was undisturbed. The combination lock showed no sign of tampering. And yet the card was on my table, face up, the blonde figure's raised fist pointing toward the ceiling. I called Daniel. I did not touch the card. "Don't touch it," he said immediately, which was the right call. "I'll be there in 20. He arrived with a UV flashlight, journalist habit, he said, for checking documents, and swept it over the card's surface. In the blue-white light, barely visible against the card's illustration, were 3 letters written in a substance that only showed under ultraviolet. Not ink. Something organic. They read, STP. We looked at each other. "Stop," I said. "Or initials," Daniel said. "Or the card is telling us something about itself." I took the UV light and held it over the entire Charismatic Leader card, slowly, inch by inch. Along the bottom edge, in the same invisible writing, a longer message had been left. We leaned in together and read it word by word as Daniel spoke them aloud into his recorder. He was planned before he announced. The card was drawn for him before he decided. The network faction approved. The gnomes provided the capital structure. The Bavarian Illuminati needed a Charismatic Leader card to be in play before they could trigger the next sequence. He does not know he is a card. Most leaders don't. Find the enough is enough card. It's the only defense. But playing defense in this game is how you lose. In the game, enough is enough was a plot card from the Assassin's expansion. Its function, remove any personality card from play permanently, regardless of how many power counters they had. No defense. No response. The most drastic card in the deck. In the real world in WoW mythology, analysts noted that an enough is enough card was already in circulation. It appeared on eBay and lots being sold by collectors, frequently paired with what sellers titled, in product listings, as the Trump card and MAGA card. The political inference was obvious, and the sellers were enjoying the joke. The message on the card was not enjoying the joke. Enough is enough. Plot card middle dot Assassin's expansion middle dot ultra rare. Cancels any personality card immediately. Cannot be blocked. Cannot be countered. Can only be played once per game. The player who uses it spends all their remaining money counters. The question is whether removing one piece disrupts the sequence, or whether the sequence has already anticipated its own interruption and adjusted accordingly. Chapter 7. The Epidemic Card. February middle. 18 months after the flea market. By the time the first reports came out of Wuhan, Daniel and I had been living inside the game's logic long enough that we recognized the card before the news anchors had agreed on a name for the virus. Epidemic, Daniel said, watching his laptop screen in my living room. Exactly as written. Watch the next card. We watched. Quarantine followed within weeks, exactly as the card sequence predicted. Epidemic always enabled quarantine as a free play on the following turn. Emergency government powers followed. The media card activated, filling every channel with a single narrative that allowed no competing information. The gnomes of Zumlich's pharmaceutical subsidiaries surged in valuation while every other sector contracted. He watched barbed wire go up around the White House during the protests that summer, and neither of us said anything for a long time. They're playing the board fast now, Daniel said finally. The sequence used to take years between cards. Decades. Now it's months. Endgame, I said. He nodded. He'd been sleeping badly. We both had. The story we'd been developing, carefully, cautiously, with more documentation than anything I'd ever filed, was finished in draft. We had Fenwick's testimony. We had the redacted warrant. We had the UV photographs of the charismatic leader card. We had 17 months of notes, cross-referenced across 3 drives and 2 cloud accounts and a physical notebook I carried everywhere and never let out of my sight. We had filed none of it. Not because we were afraid of being wrong. Because we were afraid of being right. Middle dot middle dot middle dot. Prominent investigative journalist found dead in Santa Fe home. The New Mexican middle dot local news middle dot page 4. D. Fenwick, 71, a retired commercial illustrator, was found deceased at his home on Camino Cerrito Thursday morning. Police listed the cause of death as natural causes pending a full medical examiner's report. Fenwick, a longtime resident of the Santa Fe arts community, had no known next of kin. His home was found in normal order. Neighbors reported no unusual activity. A representative of the medical examiner's office confirmed the body showed no signs of foul play. I read the clipping 11 times. I did not call Daniel. I put on my shoes. I drove to his apartment and knocked until he opened the door, still in yesterday's clothes, laptop in hand, having read the same clipping 6 minutes before me. He kept the envelopes at his house, I said. I know. We photographed them. I know. He stepped back from the door. Come in. Close the door. Tell me where your copies are. 3 places. You? 4. None of them connected to the internet. We sat down. Outside, Austin was being Austin, loud and warm and completely indifferent. Cars passing. Someone somewhere playing music. The completely ordinary world going about its completely ordinary business, unaware that in a small apartment on East 12th Street, 2 journalists who had never played a card game were now deep inside one, and the game had just eliminated a piece they'd needed. Daniel picked up his copy of the INWA rule book. He'd had it for 8 months, acquired through the collector. He opened it to the section on the servants of Cthulhu, the faction that won by destroying its own pieces. They don't just play the board, he said. They play the players. He set the put down. Fenwick was a player. He just didn't know it. We're players too, Mara. We've been players since the flea market. I know, I said. Which means the question isn't whether to publish. It's whether publishing is the move they want us to make. I had thought about this. I had been thinking about it since the message on my phone after Santa Fe. I had been thinking about it in the way you think about a locked room you're already inside, trying every wall for a door, knowing the room was built by someone smarter than you and with considerably more time. The game has a mechanic, I said. The Discordian Society faction. They win by spreading confusion, making everything contradictory, making it impossible to establish any consensus reality. I paused. If someone with that playbook wanted to neutralize investigative journalism about their operations, the most effective way would not be to suppress the information. It would be to flood the zone with 1,000 versions of the same information, some true, some false, all mixed together, so that the true version couldn't be distinguished from the noise. Canon, Daniel said quietly. The game's Discordian faction was activated long before we got here. Every conspiracy theory in circulation now, every wild, impossible, demonstrably false one, functions as camouflage for the real ones. If we publish into a world where our documentation looks identical, from a distance, to flat earth videos and lizard people forums. I stopped. They prepared that environment for exactly this moment. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then, so the play they want us to make is silence. And the play we're supposed to think they don't want is publication. And the play that would actually disrupt them is something that doesn't exist in the rule book, I said. Chapter 8. Off the grid. Undisclosed location middle dot present day. There is an INWA card called Off the Grid. It is one of the rarest in the set, an ultra rare from the Assassin's expansion, almost impossible to find in circulation. Its effect is simple and devastating. The player who activates it removes themselves from all control arrows simultaneously. No faction can control them. No group card can be linked to them. No personality card can target them. For 3 turns, they exist entirely outside the game's power structure. The cost is everything they'd accumulated. All their money counters. All their existing control. They become powerful in a new way, unheld, unaccountable, and utterly powerless in the old way. It's the card that veteran players keep in their deck but never play, because the sacrifice is too high unless the moment is exactly right. Daniel and I had been off the grid for 4 months when I started writing this account. We were not in hiding, that's not quite right. We were in a place with no consistent address and rotating communications, and the physical copies of our documentation split between 7 locations in 4 states, none of which I will name here. We were still working. We had found 2 other journalists in the same situation, people who had pulled on the same thread and arrived at the same room and were now circling the same problem. How do you disclose something that the disclosure architecture has been specifically engineered to absorb and neutralize? The answer we arrived at was, in its way, beautiful. It was also terrifying. You don't publish in the traditional sense. You don't submit to an editor and enter the pipeline of a system that has spent decades being infiltrated by the network factions control arrows. You distribute the raw material, every document, every photograph, every UV scan, every audio recording from Phoenix Kitchen, simultaneously, to so many places and through so many channels that no single point of suppression can stop it. You play not one card but the entire hand at once. You win not by having the strongest Illuminati, but by dissolving the game board entirely. Enough is enough. Plot card middle dot the only one left. We had not yet played this card. We were not sure we ever would. In the game, it removes a single personality. In the real world, we were no longer thinking about removing a piece. We were thinking about something the rulebook hadn't anticipated. What if you stopped playing the game entirely and showed everyone else the board? Middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot. I keep the original box on a shelf where I can see it. The pyramid with its eye. The eye that seems, in certain lights, to track you. Daniel asked me once, late at night, the kind of late where honesty costs nothing because you're too tired to be careful, whether I believed the game was prophecy, or engineering, or coincidence, or something else entirely, some 4th category we didn't have a word for. I told him what I actually thought. I think the game is a mirror. I think whoever made it, whoever sent those envelopes to Phoenix mailbox, whoever ensured that a specific box ended up under a specific flea market table in Austin for me to find on a specific Sunday when I had nowhere else to be, I think they wanted someone to look at the mirror and see the structure behind it. Not to stop it. Not necessarily. But to know it was there. To name it. To put the control arrows on a wall and look at them and say, this is how it works, this is what it is, this is what has always been happening while you thought something else was happening. Because the Illuminati, in the game and perhaps in the world, are not afraid of being seen. They have always operated most effectively in plain sight, behind the thinnest possible veil, trusting that the veil would hold because most people do not want to look at what's behind it. The veil is very thin. It has always been very thin. You just have to be willing to look. Middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot. The thin man at the flea market. The linen shirt. The careful hands. I have thought about him every day for 2 years. I have tried to find him, in security footage from the venue, in records of vendors, in any database or platform or connection I could find. He does not appear to exist. The other vendors at the market remember him vaguely, the way you remember a weather pattern. He was there, and then he wasn't, and the day felt different after he left. I have one photograph. I took it reflexively, the habit of a journalist, when he turned away. It shows the back of a linen shirt. The set with careful shoulders. And in the background, on the table, the box with the pyramid eye, and beside it, laid out in a neat fan as if he'd been examining them before I arrived, 9 cards. I enlarged the photograph until the cards were readable. I had to enlarge it 17 times before the text resolved. Each card was an Illuminati faction card. All 9 factions. Laid out in a sequence I'd never seen in any rulebook, a configuration that veteran in-will players later told me represented a very specific end state, the moment in the game when all factions have reached their maximum power simultaneously, when the board is so fully controlled that any further play is purely ceremonial. The game, in other words, already finished. Already won. Already over. Whoever he was, he hadn't been selling the game. He'd been retiring it. Passing it on to someone with nothing at stake and therefore nothing to lose. Someone who would look at it with fresh eyes and see, for the first time, what experienced players had stopped being able to see, the whole board at once. He knew I would look. He knew Daniel would come. He knew about Fennec, and the envelopes, and Santa Fe, and everything that followed. The move had already been calculated. The cards had already been dealt. We were never outside the game. There is no outside. But here is the thing about InWorld that the conspiracy analysts miss. Because they're too focused on the predictions, the game was designed to be won. Someone wins. Every session, someone wins. And the win condition, the one that overrides every faction's special victory, the one buried in the rulebook's final pages in text so small you need a magnifying glass, reads as follows. If at any point all players simultaneously reveal their hands, showing every card they hold, every plan they have, every control arrow they have drawn, the game ends immediately. No faction wins. All factions win. The board is cleared. A new game begins. This condition is called full disclosure. It has never been achieved in a recorded game.